Hello, everyone. My name is Quentin Lister with Utah Family Law TV, and today we will be speaking with Denise Gascoigne again about diet, divorce, and also diet and nutrition as it relates to divorce. Denise is a registered dietitian and nutritionist. She is a national board certified health and wellness coach, a professionally certified coach, as well as a mindfulness-based eating specialist. And so she is more than qualified to be talking about this with me today. And so I wanted to give Denise, though, the opportunity, as always, to give her contact information for those who are watching at home who would like to get in contact with her after viewing this. So Denise, take it away.
Well, thank you, Quentin. And it's always a pleasure to be here with you to talk about nutrition and how we can best nourish our children and families, particularly through difficult situations. If you want to reach me going forward, I can be reached on my cell phone, which is 508-505-0015. I'm in the process of revamping my website, which you can find me at www.denisegascoigne.com. And I'll go ahead and spell that out, DENISEGASCOIGNE.com. You can also hopefully find me on Thumbtack. I'll be on Thumbtack and should be popping up for throughout the state of Utah.
Awesome. Thank you, Denise. So, so before we get going on the topic of diet and nutrition and as it relates to divorce, one thing that we spoke about briefly before we started recording here was mindfulness-based eating. And so you're a mindfulness-based eating specialist. And so one thing that I think might be helpful before we start talking about particulars would be just to get a definition of what exactly is meant by mindfulness-based eating for those who might be new to that, or maybe it might be the first time they're hearing that term, and then what specifically that means to you and what it would mean for those who would be working with you.
Sure. Well, mindfulness-based eating is an approach to help individuals tune into their hunger and satiety cues and make peace with food. Sometimes in our journey in life, we can develop some not so good habits when it comes to our relationship with food. And so mindfulness-based eating helps to mitigate some of the issues that can develop over time in a dysfunctional relationship with food. It integrates mindfulness-based practices, which some of you may be familiar with through the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn, a researcher out of Massachusetts. You'll see a lot of references to mindfulness, when you're at the checkout stand of the grocery store or even online. And really what the evidence is showing is that the more we tune into ourselves and start, asking ourselves about what's going on in our mind and in our bodies, then we can, better tune in and make better decisions for ourselves accordingly. And that is very much tied into food and nutrition.
Thank you for that answer. And this term of having a dysfunctional relationship with food, I've definitely heard that as well in other conversations I've had. And so for you, that idea of having a dysfunctional relationship with food, so what specifically, what can that look like? We're probably all aware of, for instance, like eating disorders that many people have and struggle with. But even if it's not to the point where it's like I'm starving myself or I have bulimia or something like that, what I'm sure there's some kind of gradation as far as what is meant by a dysfunctional relationship with food.
Yeah,
that makes
good
sense.
question. And really dysfunctions can represent themselves in all sorts of ways. Yo-yo dieting, just being tuned out of your body, not necessarily tuning in and responding to your natural hunger and satiety and even thirst cues. Maybe not opting for the foods that your body needs, and more going along the lines of some trigger foods, including, a lot of highly processed snack foods or high sugar foods that we tend to know don't necessarily make us feel good after we eat them, especially if we overindulge in them. And so with mindfulness-based eating, it's really making peace with food. So you can still enjoy the foods that you like, you just do it in a more mindful way. And you literally ask yourself, well, what do I want? And am I, where am I on, say, the hunger and satiety spectrum? Am I really hungry or am I not so hungry? And responding accordingly, just giving yourself some guardrails that aren't going to create a lot of drama for you. Sometimes we really try to have a white knuckle death grip on what we put in our mouth or how we approach food, and it creates more drama than we need. I also wanted to say that the mindfulness-based eating approach that I'm trained in has actually been studied and researched and shown to be very effective with helping individuals to reach their healthy weight and develop a sustainable, healthy relationship with food for the long term. It was studied by Dr. Jean Christeller out of Indiana. So it's a well thought and well-planned approach to health and wellness.
Yeah. No, that's great. I just learned so much just from that one question. So thank you so much. And I think that'll help as we get into the further topics. I think that'll help those watching as well. One thing we talked about, moving towards kind of like, so we have this idea of mindfulness-based eating and kind of like what it means to have like a dysfunctional relationship with food. And so would you say that like sometimes these things can be like kind of like triggered or become more severe as we go through, like, this might be an obvious thing, but as we go through a life altering or a life changing circumstance, for instance, divorce or some sort of family or domestic relations issue, that kind of thing.
Absolutely. Yes. Okay. As a matter of fact, we tend to, develop some dysfunctional behavioral patterns during high stressful situations. And divorce is considered to be one of the most stressful experiences that we can go through. And so particularly for children, oftentimes they don't have the developmental wherewithal to articulate their what they're going through. They can't even articulate it to themselves, let alone maybe their parents. They're just kind of going along for the ride. And as maybe a way in which they can self-soothe, they might turn to food or develop ways in which they can kind of control their situation by controlling food. And you mentioned some eating disorders, and certainly issues related to anorexia and bulimia, even eating disorders not otherwise specified. That's an actual term, like binge eating, and where you may be overindulge and kind of try to develop some compensatory behavior. These can all manifest, they can find kind of some root causes in our childhood. And so as a parent going through a divorce, you would want to be very mindful about how that divorce is impacting your child, particularly with regards to their relationship with food.
See, that leads me to this question. So as a parent, how would you kind of, in a healthy way, how would you check in with a child, especially a child that you're sharing custody with the other parent and whatnot? Like, how would you check in with them about like kind of like how they're, obviously you can look at like how they're eating, I guess, right, when they're with you, but like what's one way to like kind of help gauge like what their relationship with food is like and how you can help them make sure that they're getting the nutrition they need?
Yeah. Ultimately, in a divorced or separated situation, you truly only have control over what is happening when you have the child or children.
Sure.
So to fixate on controlling what is happening when they are with he or she or they are with the other parent, would probably only foster more conflict. So you have to kind of take a stoic approach. And the stoicism is like an ancient Greek and Roman
Yes.
philosophy that really helps us to make peace with what we can control and what we can't control. And certainly you can't control what is happening in the other partner's household. You know, maybe you can have some influence, but ultimately it's probably not worth it getting into, you know, a lot of wrangling over, you know, what happens when you pass the child off. So with that in mind, when you do have your child, doing what you can to foster a healthy relationship with food is really going to go a long way. And a lot of that is going to be in how you're modeling your relationship with food as an individual. Children are very smart. They tune in, they're watching and they're taking notes. And they're going to be paying very close attention to what you're doing and how you're interacting with food. So just kind of keep that in mind. But, you know, with regards to your child, you know, bring your child involved in the process of making decisions about food, and not necessarily giving them full license, but giving them some options, you know, some choices per se, you know, healthy this or healthy that, you know, which one do you want? Or, you know, more than say a binary option.
Right.
And then also, you know, getting them involved in not only the selection, but the, you know, really the whole, everything from, you know, garden to mouth of what's going on in that process or that decision-making process. So the planning of foods and talking about, you know, nutrition and how important it is for their well-being in a way where, you know, it's with curiosity and mindfulness. And, you know, and your child might not be interested. That's fine. You know, you don't want to force them into this conversation, but certainly at some point in the day, they have to eat. And so, you know, they're going to have to make a decision. And ultimately, you are the gatekeeper as a parent to what foods are in the house, what foods you buy, you know, how you nourish your child. That is truly your responsibility. And so just keeping that in mind, you know, as you go throughout the day, will you know, pay off in spades for, you know, just your overall well-being, how you feel in the short term, and then what you're fostering in the long term.
Thank you so much for sharing that answer, Denise. And I think one thing that I picked up on from that answer was the idea of personal responsibility, especially when you talked about the parent being the gatekeeper of like what food is in their house. And so I think I just think about that in just relation as well, even when you don't even, it comes down to like what food you buy yourself and what food you allow, like, you know, to be in your home and to begin with. Right. And I think that that's kind of, it seems like it starts a little bit earlier than when you're asking your child what they want to eat. Like it starts like when you're either planning or when you're at the grocery store or whatnot. And so I guess it's, so is it, in order to be a little bit more responsible, how much, like for someone who like is, you know, not really, who say someone feels like they're starting out at, you know, like at square one, they're like learning all about this or whatever for the first time. How big is the learning curve in terms of like learning to just like treat your body better, especially in terms of what you eat and how you nourish yourself and the people around you? Is it like a steep curve, or is it something that is pretty like gradual and something that, you know, can be done pretty easily, a step-by-step process? What is this process like as you've seen?
The latter of what you just said. It's a step-by-step process. So, you know, we don't come out of the womb knowing everything about nutrition. I've gone through years of schooling and I'm still learning. And frankly, you know, nutrition science is still in its infancy in some regards. We know a lot, but we're learning more. And ultimately, you know, there's a Chinese adage that goes, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today. So ultimately, you can find knowledge and a lot of information out there on the internet, books, YouTubes. It is important to be a little discerning. Not everyone not all the influencers necessarily have the bona fides to give you reliable and frankly healthy information. Ultimately, it needs to be, whatever your approach to nutrition needs to be sustainable for you. And some basic principles that can kind of help you along the way is to consider how far removed from its natural sources what you're eating, how processed. We're moving away from highly processed. That doesn't mean that we eat everything raw.
Right.
There's some approaches that have that. That's yet another extreme approach, in my humble opinion, and I should say not so humble opinion. I'm a firm believer that we need to live within our environment, and we need to work with kind of where we're at. So baby steps towards the direction. And you mentioned the gatekeeping as kind of a something that I had said, and you had also referenced, and because that resonated with you. And from my experience in working with parents and children, one of the things that I've kind of noticed is that sometimes a parent will just assume that a child, isn't making the right choices. Like they may not understand why their child is overweight. And they think they push the onus of responsibility on the child. What's important to realize as a parent is that the cognitive abilities of your child to make wise and well-informed decisions it's very likely not there. That's not to say that there are, a child is going to, not make healthy decisions when given an opportunity, but you do have to kind of tap their rudder, so to speak. You have to give them a little bit of guidance. And so just kind of keep that in mind. And especially that's age appropriate. So kind of keeping that in mind, and that goes for everything related to children. And I can say that, with hindsight, looking back on my experiences with my children, that, you being more aware of what they can do at their particular age will help to, just take a lot of stress off you and your child, and develop a better interactions, particularly related to food.
Thank you. That was very insightful. I appreciate all your answers today. I think right now, I want to keep going, but I think that's the time we have. That's the time we have for today. But it's been great, Denise. I want to give you the chance one more time to share your contact information for those watching at home, in case they missed it the first time. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Sure. Once again, DeniseGascoigne.com. You can find me on Thumbtack, and also 508-505-0015 is my cell number. And I'd be happy to come back. I'd even be happy to kind of go through some more principles of healthy eating, just some basics that can help you to create a framework from which to draw upon as you transition maybe to being the sole cook and shopper. So right. That's, these are challenging, and especially for fathers it can be. So I think that there are just some basics that you can kind of keep in mind, and that will help you along the way.
Thank you so much, Denise. Oh, it's wonderful.
Thank you.